Hey, everybody. This is the Workplace Therapist Show, and this is our Leadership Lunch Edition. It's a special day for me because I'm actually back in the studio. So first time in the studio in like 3 months, and it's really exciting to be back and frankly, a little bit weird. And so with me on my show today is the amazing, stylish, fantastic Whitney Mendoza. Whitney, how are you doing?
Good, Brandon. How are you?
I'm great. I'm back in the studio. I'm back with all my bobblehead friends for the first time in 3 months.
I'm
were
coming.
missing me.
I've got this really important live show I've got to do right now, but then I'm coming.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Well, yes, you have to do this show. So we're doing for the show today. We're doing it a little bit different than we have in the past of these leadership lunch shows, because we always had a guest on and we would talk about something related to kind of our current situation and environment. And we can still do that, but it's just going to be you and me. So we're going to make this one of our Ask the Therapist shows. So we've got a bunch of questions that we've gotten from you all listening and watching over the last couple months. We've kind of gathered those and we're going to kind of go through them. But it's also a live show on Facebook. So if you're watching the show, please send in some comments or questions and we'll take them on. So it's kind of an opportunity to really ask anything under the sun. I don't know if I'm going to have the right answer, but I can give you an answer. So maybe that's a good starting place. Oh, before we jump in, of course, on all these shows, we talk about something positive going on in the week. And I can tell you, for me, being back in the studio is definitely a very positive thing. So that's a feeling really, really good. And I'm really excited because I'm just a few weeks out from my official book launch. Actually, 3 weeks out. So July 1st is the book launch date. So I'm like counting down the days until it's actually here and available and ready to go. So more on that for everybody kind of watching and listening, but super excited. How about you, Whitney? What's been kind of going on in your week?
So first, really quickly, we get a signed copy of your book, right?
If you're nice.
Ooh, okay. Well, that probably puts me at jeopardy. My highlight of the week hasn't happened, but it happens tonight. It's actually my father-in-law's birthday. And so we're all going to go out as a family to his favorite restaurant. And we haven't done that in a couple of months with everything being shut down due to COVID. So
have you gone out to any restaurant at all?
Well, not as a family. We've been doing more, like Isaac and I will do takeout. Like we love doing that. And we have totally been all about supporting local restaurants. But as a family to go and sit down at a restaurant, I think it's been a couple of months. I mean, Isaac can vouch for that, but I feel like it's been since probably before quarantine.
Yeah, I've only, so my folks are in a kind of a assisted living facility. So they're kind of been on lockdown. And so every Friday, I take an order from them, any restaurant they want, and I place the order and I go pick it up and bring them that. So, and then I might bring something home for us too. So that's kind of takeout, been doing lots of that. The only restaurant I've gone in and sat down and eaten at was I took Noah and Aaron, my two boys, to Waffle House a couple weeks ago. And that was the cleanest Waffle House experience I've ever had.
I bet.
So it was kind of nice. It really was good to kind of be somewhat feeling normal, and hopefully more and more of that to come in the next few weeks. So I guess why don't we go ahead and pivot over to the questions? I think you've got some in front of you. Do you still have them in front of you?
I do. I'm ready.
Okay, I think I'm ready too. Let's go.
Okay, here we go. Dear Workplace Therapist, I've been in my current role as a manager for about 2 years with a well-known Fortune 500 company. Last year, my boss and her boss discussed my future with the company, and I was told I was a rising star, and they planned to promote within 6 to 8 months, which would have set me up for a promotion at the end of Q2 2020. Due to the recent disruption of COVID-19, I have not yet received the promotion, and worse, I've not gotten any updates from my boss. I know the world is in a pandemic, but I would like to broach the matter with my boss in a way that isn't pushy or insensitive, but provides me with some answers. What is the best way to go about this? Signed, Starstruck.
Yeah, yikes. So like totally natural thing. You're ready for your next career move, or you've been promised something, and then we get a global pandemic that basically puts everything on hold. So I would say before we jump into how to have the conversation, probably important to know when to have the conversation. So what we don't know is much about the company other than it's Fortune 500. And also what we don't know is how much they've been impacted by COVID-19. So some companies, you were talking, have lost revenues as much as 40%, maybe even more. Other companies, it's been less significant from that standpoint. So if the company's been really hit hard and they've had to do layoffs, furloughs and layoffs, that's one kind of conversation. So we'll talk about that. If the company's been thriving and doing really well, that's another conversation, okay? Because from all the folks I talk to, it's across the board. Everything from we're shuttering to it's been business as usual for the most part. So let's talk about kind of the worst case scenario. So if it's a really worst case scenario, I would not recommend you go in and say, hey, you promised me this whole thing, 6 to 8 months thing, and now it's time, like we need to have this conversation. I wouldn't go in that kind of directive or aggressive. I would go in and say, hey, I acknowledge the situation we've been in. It's been really, really tough. And under the circumstances, I completely understand that there might be freezes on promotions, let alone other things. But I would like to talk to you about when you think it'd be appropriate to open this discussion. So you basically have the conversation to set up the conversation. And likely that's going to be sometime around Q4, probably end of the year, when things start to stabilize or start to move back into some kind of normal. But again, depending upon the business, we could be looking at 18 months until it gets back to normal. But I do think what is fair is for them to give you a date on when they're willing to talk to you about it. So I think I would ask for that. Now, if it's been business as usual, I think you just say, hey, we've been very fortunate. We've been kind of performing pretty well. We're going to hit our numbers at the end of the year. I'm really excited. And I know all of us have been working really hard. I recognize that COVID has thrown off some of our plans. And I know that originally we talked about moving me into a promotion around Q2. And I understand that couldn't happen, but it's still very much on my radar. So I'd like to set up some time to talk about when we can make that happen in 2020. So I wouldn't necessarily pin them down to a date, but you notice I added that subtle part of when can we make this happen in 2020? And so you remember, as folks who've listened to the show before, one of the main things we're trying to do is drive clarity. Drive clarity. We have these conversations so we can drive clarity. Now, what a lot of hiring managers will do, or leaders, is they're going to try not to let you drive clarity on this conversation. They're going to try and create smoke screens to put it off so they don't have to, go to their boss and make the ask for the money or the raise or mess up the political structure. Because that's what happens. The more higher up we get, and when you get promoted into a certain role, it shifts the political game. That's why you'll see real senior people hesitate on promoting people into more senior roles. Fairly easy to move someone in a manager role, much harder to move them into a vice president role because it messes up the politics and the turf. And so they become more hesitant, gun shy to do that. So just something to kind of be aware of, but you want to kind of pin them down to a date. When can we talk about this? And then if they don't do it, then you can say, oh, clearly this is not the right, probably home for me. And you might want to look for something else. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that helps. Let's take on another question and then we can see if we've got any on Facebook.
Okay, perfect. Question number 2 of the day. Dear workplace therapist, several months ago, I approached my manager about the company paying for membership dues for me to be in a professional organization to which I've been invited. The invitation to join is somewhat of an honor and a recognition in our industry. It is also several $1,000s. My manager agreed that the company would pay the membership fee on my behalf. That was before the recent events led to working from home and a sizable number of our employees being furloughed. The membership fee is due next month. Is it appropriate to approach my boss about the company's contribution on my behalf? Signed, dues or don't?
Okay. So another sticky situation around timing. It's all about timing, right? So the company agreed to pay this fee, a couple $1,000, and then COVID-19 happens. Folks are furloughed, and obviously money is tight with the company, and dues are due next month. So assuming you can't kind of put it off, and you really want to make this happen, I would offer two different strategies if you want to make the ask. The first strategy is I would recommend that you consider possibly paying a portion of it yourself. So to kind of say, hey, I recognize when we originally talked about this, the company was going to pay for it. It's very meaningful to me. I'm willing to split it. So I'll pay half of it out of my pocket if you could pay the other half. So show that you recognize the sensitivity around the current situation. The second thing I would recommend is, if possible, be able to make the case on how this is going to benefit the company. Particularly if you're dealing with furloughing employees, that means revenue's down. That means sales are down. So how could this, being part of this industry group or network, in some way benefit the company from a sales standpoint? If you can make that case, it could also go a long way. And if you make that case strongly enough, you might not have to put in any of your own money. But I do think there's something very symbolic of saying, I want to pay for part of it because it's so meaningful to me. So those two together will probably give you the best strategy if you can't delay the dues in any way. So that's another approach too, is go back and ask the industry association. They're going to be like everybody else. They're going to have to make adjustments. We've seen people when companies make adjustments on things they've never done before, just because they recognize this is a very surreal time for everybody. So all those would be kind of ways to have the conversations and ways to kind of navigate around that. Yeah.
That's good. Okay. Okay. Skin in the game.
Yes, skin in the game, Whitney. It's all about skin in the game.
I feel like that should be a business jargon, wherever that plays in.
That would have been a really good one. That would have played in on the sports one that we had with John Kim. Yeah. Skin in the game.
Just a little extra addition there.
That was really good. Darn. So do we have any questions in Facebook?
We do. So Brittany, not to be confused with Whitney, Brittany is asking, she's got some team members that just overall, she's feeling this sense of a little bit burned out. Yep. Right? She can kind of feel that everyone's a little bit on edge. We've kind of been working from home for a really long time, and they're in the middle of this growth spurt. So maybe some of her team members are getting a little overburdened. So everything's just starting to pile on. They're waiting for a couple of more signatures to come through on some deals to get over that kind of growth hump. She wants to know, how does she communicate this to her team to get them to hang in there until they kind of get over this hump? So to speak or not to speak, that is the question. I added in that last part.
It's a really good question. And okay, so I have a feeling a lot of folks watching and listening to this can relate to this. So what has happened, which I've noticed and observed, is that when we first started working from home, everyone said, "Oh my gosh, this is great! Like, I got all this free time. I'm not commuting, and I'm just hanging out at home, and it's more efficient." And then we started to see kind of meeting creep. I've got one client that's had such bad meeting creep that they're having meetings start at 7:30 in the morning, and they have meetings all the way up until 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. Because they can. You would never do that in a regular office. You would never do a meeting at 7:30 a.m. But when everybody's at home, sure, why not? So it could also be a factor around that. So I want to acknowledge that it could just be that they are getting burned out because all that free time is getting taken over. So managing that's important. Now let's talk about how you kind of keep them motivated and hang in there. I had a client tell me several years ago, she said, I think anybody can do anything if they know when it's going to end. And so it kind of goes to that. And so it goes to, so the strategy would be something that we've talked about in the past. It comes from a guy named Jim Fowler, used to be a famous theologian at Emory's Theology School. He since passed away. But he would say you want to give people, as leaders, you want to give people hope and handles. So hope and handles is the way you want to approach this. So hope is paint a picture of saying, hey folks, things are looking really good. We're getting really close. I can't tell you exactly when it's going to be. I don't know, but it looks like there's going to be kind of relief in the future as soon as these deals get signed, and we're so close. And then handles is, what can they do to feel a better sense of kind of focus and security? So handles would be kind of focus on the week ahead, 1 week at a time. So let's just focus while we're waiting on this great thing to happen. Let's just focus kind of 1 week at a time. So here's the stuff that is going to be our high priorities for this week. So just focus on these. A burnout also comes when we make everything urgent all the time, which is a nice little plug for my book, The Hot Sauce Principle, How to Live and Lead in a World Where Everything is Urgent All the Time. And so when we do that, we make things urgent all the time, people get burned out and they can't focus. There's no priorities. So if I was being more prescriptive, I would say you want to try and focus, if you can, focus it down to 3 priorities. 3 priorities is key. So if you can say, here's the 3 things we're going to focus on this week, that will help prevent some burnout. People can focus. So hope and handles. Great question.
I love the 3 things to focus on. I'm a numbers person like that. I love bullets and lists. So I like 3.
Yeah, 3. And what's nice about 3 is just, you see the pattern of 3 pop up with us as human beings all the time in so many aspects of our life, both in the spirituality side, but just in other elements of our life. You see 3 pop up over and over again. And part of why 3 is so powerful is it's really easy for us to remember. We can focus on 3 things. 5, we're pushing the envelope. And there was some studies back in the early part of the 20th century, early psychology studies on what people can remember. And they found that 7 plus or minus is kind of the line in the sand. Once we go past 7, people just forget all of it. And that is one of the reasons why, at least some have argued, one of the reasons why our phone numbers are 7 digits, because we can remember 7 digits. They're not 12 digits. We wouldn't be able to remember all those. Yeah. Okay. So do you have another one for me?
Yes. Can we take one more from Facebook? I mean, we've got some others that were sent in by email. But,
okay. Yeah, let's do Facebook. Totally.
Definitely send them in live on Facebook. But one came across and I was like, ooh, yes, I want to ask this one. Joe wants to know, what are some ways to approach your boss in ways that you can offer help? So how can we go to our boss and ask, what are the ways that I can help right now during this time?
Okay. All right. So in this case, we want to kind of a good framing around this, and this is good for any situation, but particularly for this one, is don't think of your boss as your boss. Think of your boss as your number 1 client. And you are, a service provider, consultant, contractor, but they're your number 1 client. Because guess what, folks? They are. So when you are wearing that hat, then when you sit down with your boss, you want to say, hey, I want to just take a few minutes to kind of get a better understanding of some of all the plates you're spinning. What are some of the things that you're working on? And what are some of the goals that you have and how those might have changed over the last few months? And then I want to spend some time talking about how I might be able to kind of assist you in some of those areas, take some of those things off your plate so you can focus on the big things that only you can do. So I think kind of go in with that spirit. So, you want to try and get a sense of what are their goals and objectives? What are the things they're working on? How has that changed? One of the classic, consulting lines is, what keeps you up at night? So you can kind of ask a question kind of like that and then say, now what are the things that only you can do? And then try and offer assistance in the other areas. That would be a really helpful thing to do. And if you know what those things already are, so let's take a kind of a part 2 to this. If you already know the answer to those questions, then go in with kind of a 1-pager, like create a little 1-page document with almost like a proposal or a recommendation. Just like if you were a service provider or contractor and you come and say, here's how I think I can help you. And here's all I would need from you in order for me to be able to do it. So make a little bit almost like a little sales pitch or a little recommendation document. Just 1-pager and review it with them. They'll really appreciate that kind of that structure.
I love it. It's good, Brandon.
Well, thanks, so Whitney. See, this one happened. I've been cooped up in my house for 3 months. Can't answer any of these questions, and then bottles it all up and save it for today. Okay, Isaac just said Chi Chi just asked a question on Facebook.
She did. All right. Chi Chi says, from being in quarantine, what if you have found new ways of doing your work more efficiently? Ooh. How can you introduce that into the physical workplace? What do you do if you get pushback?
Okay. All right. So I love that question. I would say, let's go back to the question I just answered a minute ago. Same idea. You're going to be a service provider. You're going to be a consultant. Okay. So you want to make the case on why this new approach is going to be more efficient or effective. What it's going to save the company in terms of either resources or time. And remember, time's our most precious resource. And everything is urgent all the time. So if we can save time, that's a really valuable resource. So I would make that case. The other element around this is when you're kind of selling an idea or selling change, no one ever wants to be the first to try it. So you want to be able to present like a case study. So almost like here's how I did this and when it saved me. Or you might even be able to get a couple other people to try the same thing, and then you have a little bit of like a beta test. You can say, so don't take my word for it. Look, myself and these 3 colleagues all tried the same approach, and we tracked it over 2 weeks, and look what we saved. So being able to kind of show that will be comfortable. And the last thing I would do is, in the spirit of beta test, don't frame up a change like, I need you to make a decision on a permanent change. That also will get a manager to kind of back off. Frame it up as, let's just try it for a month and see how it goes. So just all I'm asking for is permission to try it for a month. And then at the end of the month, we'll decide if we want to go back to the way it was before or stick with this new thing. If you set it up as like a little test or a case study like that, or just a little beta test, you're going to be much more well received because it's not as scary.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I love that. And that particular question is getting a lot of interaction on Facebook too. Everyone's wondering that, right? We've been forced into efficiency from working out of our home. So that was a good question, Chi-Chi.
Yeah. Well, and I hope that there isn't going to be as much pushback as we think, because every single company or organization, nonprofits included, that I talk to have all said, every single one, there hasn't been one that hasn't changed their policy. They've all said, HR is busily rewriting our working from home and flexible work policy. So I think you're going to have a lot more openness to new ideas and ways of working, particularly if it saves the company money and creates greater efficiency.
All right, you ready for another Facebook question?
I'm ready.
Stephanie asks, how do you balance the efficiency of teleworking and the personal touch of in-person interactions that many will push for once we return to normal?
Oh boy. Okay. Well, so first of all, I would say no two people are alike. Some people really, really need that in-person time. And so they're going to want that, if not every day, most days. Okay. Company culture also matters in this too. There could be some companies that still highly value being in the office as just more of a you're working when you're in the office kind of status thing. So you got to take into consideration those factors. So you got to know yourself, and your environment, but most importantly, know yourself. What do you need? How much of this do you need? So depending upon that, you want to create kind of a structure that works well for you and everybody else. What I'm going to guess is going to happen, this is my looking in my crystal ball, I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of companies do some version of 2-3 work weeks. So 2 days working from home, typically Mondays and Fridays, where you can work virtually. And then you're in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And you might not even be for full days. It might just be for meetings. You just go, and that's when you have all your face-to-face meetings and do some of the alignment things that you need to have to do in the office. But then you're working from home on Mondays and Fridays. You might find you end up with 3 of those days, or even 4 of those days you can work from home. But my guess is you're going to have at least 1 day a week that you go into the office and actually see people. Particularly for those meetings where you can kind of discuss or debate or align around stuff. But it's going to be very much dependent upon you and your environment, whether you're doing 1 day from home, 2 days from home, 4 days from home. But I think creating a rhythm like that's probably where you want to go. You look very serious, Whitney. You look very serious today.
So we have another very serious Ask the Workplace Therapist question.
Okay.
You ready?
I'm
These
ready.
are good because I really like this because there's so many people that really are kind of struggling as we move back into the office. That's why I'm serious. I'm taking this to heart, Brandon. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Dear Workplace Therapist, I manage a team of 4 in an internal communications department for a small company. Like many other people, we've been working from home since March. While our work product has definitely shifted in terms of the type and regularity of communication we now provide versus what we were doing before March, we still have work that must be done. The challenge is my team seems very unmotivated, and working virtually makes it difficult to connect and infuse motivation into them. To be honest, I get it. I'm not feeling all gung-ho about work these days either, but quite frankly, we have things to do. How can I keep this department engaged from a distance? Signed, socially distanced, and distracted.
Okay. So we're going to go back to the idea of author versus editor, which I've talked before about on this show. So if you're trying to, it's a very sneaky trap we have to be careful of. We can't be responsible for how other people feel. So trying to figure out, like, how do I motivate this person or that person, and trying to guess is going to create anxiety for us. Our wheels are going to be spinning, and inevitably we're going to guess wrong. We don't need to be authoring that. We should be editing that. So in other words, the best strategy is schedule an hour virtual meeting with your team and say, hey, everybody, I'm feeling a little unmotivated these days. I am guessing you all are too. Let's talk a little about what do we need? What are some things we can do to get us motivated? How can we keep ourselves motivated? How can we keep ourselves focused? What do you need from me? And you can ask the classic stop, start, continue. What can I start doing to help motivate you all? Is there anything I could stop doing? Am I doing something that's getting in the way? Is there anything I can continue doing that would be helpful? So just facilitating that discussion is going to be a real helpful approach, because they're going to give you some great ideas that you would never have thought of. And most importantly, they're taking ownership. It's hard to motivate somebody who doesn't want to be motivated. That just doesn't work. But if they put some skin in the game and feel a little more, see how I did that? Skin in the game? If they put some skin in the game, then they're more likely to let you motivate them. So get the ideas from them. Be an editor, not an author around that.
I picked up, Brandon, I listened to these podcasts, and that was something that stuck out to me. And that was how to infuse that motivation. And you're right. I mean, your teammates really, they have to bring part of the motivation with them. You can add to it, but they've got to. Yeah,
they've got to own that. That's because so I'm putting on my therapist hat for a minute. We're not responsible for other people's feelings. Now we can care about other people, and we can help to nurture them feeling in a more positive way, but we're not responsible for how they feel. So, understanding what motivates people is a great question to ask, but taking responsibility for their motivation, that's a losing game. So we want to get them involved in the process, invite them into it. Yep.
Okay. You want to take one more?
Let's take one more.
So this one's interesting because it's a little bit opposite of what we've previously been talking about on today's show.
Okay.
So, dear Workplace Therapist, before March, my job required me to report to the office 3 days a week, make sales calls to clients 1 to 2 days each week, and spend my remaining time working from my home office. I found that schedule allowed me to focus at work when I was at work and be home and present with my family when I was at home. While I would usually check email from home once after dinner, there was enough going on with our kids that I needed to spend time with them, which I was fairly good at making time to do. Now, with the decrease in my kids' schedule and the constant Zoom and conference calls with clients and coworkers, all I have to do with my regular work, and I find I'm having trouble not working from home. Because there's always work to be done and nothing else on the outside world vying for my attention, I often find myself in my home office until 9 p.m. or later. This isn't good for me or my family. Can you help me figure out a way to manage this time crunch better? Signed, Late at the Home Office. So this individual is struggling working from home.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different.
They're working too much. Okay, so another kind of concept to kind of apply in this situation is hourly rate. Know your hourly rate. So we all have an hourly rate. While we may be paid a salary, you can break that down into an hourly rate. So figure out what your hourly rate is, and then go back and do a little calendar audit on the last week, and look at your activities and say, yeah, what of those activities should I have not done or not been involved in? In other words, I was the most expensive light bulb changer in the room. That's probably not a good use of my hourly rate, right? And then what are the activities that only I can do that is a good honoring of my hourly rate? So the first step is identifying where you have allowed yourself to misuse your hourly rate, and then start to say no to those activities. So that's probably some meetings you're attending where you're just sitting on the Zoom call passively for an hour while everyone else is talking. You shouldn't be there. If you're not contributing, you shouldn't be there. And if it's just a one-way message, they can get that to you in a different way. So start to identify those things that aren't good use of your time and push back on that. Okay, so that's the first one. Second, you need to set better boundaries on your day. You can't be working till 9 p.m. and you can't start work at 7 a.m. So put some boundaries around that. I was talking to a client yesterday, and he said to me, because this is a lot of you are going to relate to this. He said, we as a company or culture don't respect each other's calendars. So even though someone will say unavailable, they'll overwrite that with a meeting anyway. So a lot of you are nodding your heads while you're listening to this, like, yes, that's my company. Like, we do that. Like, we ignore people's calendars. He said, but I found a trick. I don't do unavailable. I put out of the office as the block. He said, that's worked really well. People have not been overriding near as much when they see I'm out of the office. So try that. So pick your blocks of where you're not going to be available and put out of the office. You're likely to be able to protect it a little bit better.
So this is interesting because I typically put ask before booking. So should I change that to out of the office?
Those are saying two different things. So out of the office is saying I'm unavailable. I'm not here. I'm somewhere in the world that I don't want you to know about, is what that's saying. Okay. Ask before booking is you need to respect my calendar just because I may be doing some other things. I may be using that time to strategize or to plan. Now, you can get away with that because you're a boss. Okay. Some people in large political organizations can't get away with that because their boss might just overwrite that, or a peer might, jump in and not pay attention. So you may have to send a message that is like, different. I like the way you do that. I think that's great. It only works if people respect it.
That's good. And that was a good differentiator too.
Yeah.
All right. You want one more?
I think, well, sure. Well, let's take one more.
All right, let's do it. Dear workplace therapist, I've worked for a retail company for almost 10 years as a manager of a product line division. When I began with the company, I was one of 6 people in this role, divided by regional territory across the U.S. Currently, due to the demise of retail for all the various reasons, I remain one of 2 people in this role, as one of my cohorts was recently abruptly let go. My challenge is that each of my colleagues' roles have been eliminated in an effort for the company to save money. I've been expected to take up the slack. My regional territory is 4 times what it was when I originally began with the company, but I've not received a pay increase or a title change in over 2 years. I understand the company is hurting, obviously, but I feel like I have no idea of what the extent of the suffering is. Therefore, I have no idea what I should expect next from the corporate heads or what my job duties might become next. Am I wrong to ask for more compensation? Should I wait or should I look for a new job? Signed, looking for some advice.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good one. So let's talk a little bit about kind of different ways people have handled some of these challenges. So I've had several clients that have had cases where rather than furloughing employees, what the company has decided to do is a unilateral pay cut for everybody. So like we don't want to let anybody go. So instead, everyone's going to take a 15% pay cut. That's going to allow us to kind of allow everyone to stay employed. I've had two completely mixed reactions. I've had one set of clients and who are part of that. They say, "Oh my gosh, it's amazing. We feel even more committed as a team. It's so great to we're all pulling together." I've got another set over here that says, my hours have gone up to like 70, 80 hours. I'm working tons of hours to try and keep everything afloat. And now I just got my salary cut by 15%. So I'm doing extra work to kind of help us survive. And now I'm getting punished for it. Doesn't feel fair. Okay. So this probably feels a little more like that one. So I would probably handle this conversation very similarly to how we talked to one of the earlier ones. I would sit down with the boss and I would say, or the leader or whoever you're reporting to, and say, I'm happy to take on the extra responsibility during this time. I know it's very important for us as a business, and I've been very committed here and excited to be able to do anything I can to grow the business. I do want to make sure we spend some time when we get through this to talk about either ways to appropriately promote me or compensate me for this extra responsibility. We don't have to do that right now, but I do want to have that conversation. Are you comfortable with having that at some point? And I would then get them to put a date on the calendar. Okay. Now, but be real careful, because I noticed said this person hasn't been promoted or any raises in many years, but they are seen as kind of a steady rock. So it almost feels like they're being taken advantage of. So I would be really clear that if they move that meeting, so let's say they set it for August 31st. Okay, I'm just picking a date out of the air. And you pick that date, and then they try and keep canceling or moving the meeting. That's a signal that you should take very clearly that they're never going to give you a raise or promotion. So you're going to have to go find it somewhere else. So then I would start looking for another job. Now, the disappointing, unfortunate thing is we're talking retail, so I'm not sure exactly how easy it'll be to find something in that sector for a little while, but you never know. So I would use this as a moment to determine and assert your value. Do they really value me here after all that I'm doing? But again, we're driving clarity. Have that conversation in August, for example, to be that clarity point for you. Okay, any other questions on Facebook?
We've gotten them all. Everyone says thank you, Brandon, for your crystal ball.
Okay, all right, great. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and thanks for watching. And I hope you found this to be valuable. Haven't really done anything quite like this before, but I think we'd like to do more of this because it's great to just get real-time questions that we can take on. And Whitney, thank you for guiding the show today.
My pleasure.
I'm really loving the kind of Miami Vice style you've got going on.
Thanks.
It's sweet.
I didn't think about that when I put this on this morning, but got a little more pep in my step with Miami Vice look.
A little more pep in your step. I like it. And again, thanks everybody for listening and watching. And until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life.